Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be, and welcome to this webinar to launch the revised SDG Acceleration Toolkit. My name is Matthew Koniak. I work with the International Labour Organization in New York. And to help set the scene of this webinar, let us just remember that already prior to COVID-19, the world was not on track to reaching the targets of the SDGs by 2030. And then, of course, came the pandemic and everything that we know that happened with it, the health crisis, the lockdowns, the economic and social crisis of a scale that we really had not seen since the Second World War. And now, with vaccines on the way, some countries are hoping to actually see the light at the end of the tunnel, while some others are still very much kept in the dark. And we have a special thought today for all of those who are suffering greatly from the pandemic, whether they are in India, in other parts of Asia, Africa, Latin America, and really the world over. So with all of this, the question is, how much further away are we today to the implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and of its 17 goals? And really, what can be done to accelerate the process? And with this, it is clear that the United Nations has a key role to play. And that's why the UN SDG task team on integrated policy support has had it as one of its key deliverables to develop an SDG acceleration toolkit that will hopefully be of great use to all of us, to all of you, whether we work with the UN, with governments, with the private sector, with civil society, in academic circles or beyond. And so today we have a really amazing panel of experts to discuss this toolkit and to see what it can mean to all of us. We have representatives from UNICEF, from UNDP, from OHCHR, from the Resident Coordinator Office in Nepal, from IOM, all of whom will really shed light on what this toolkit really means. And we will also, of course, be looking forward to hearing from you. So please prepare your questions, place them in the chat box, and we will do our best to raise them and to address them to the panelists. We also will ask you to please mute your microphones during the event and to note that this meeting is being recorded. So we only have 1 hour. Let's get started. And without further ado, I would like to turn to our first panelist, who is my dear colleague, Pernilla Ironside, who is the co-chair of the task team and is also the deputy director of the Division of Data Analytics, Planning and Monitoring at UNICEF. She will give us some background on the UN SDG work and the toolkit. So Pernilla, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mathieu, and good day to all colleagues. It's really wonderful that so many of you could join us live, and hopefully even more will have a benefit from listening to the recording afterwards. I'm Pernilla Ironside, and together with my co-chairs, Laurel Patterson from UNDP and Maurizio Buzzi from ILO, who's today represented by Mathieu, we welcome you to the webinar. And today we're introducing the online platform of the SDG Acceleration Toolkit. And we're so happy that you could join us, and we promise you it'll be a stimulating hour together. The SDG Toolkit is really a product of collaborative effort of the UN SDG task team on integrated policy support. It was initially released in 2017, and the process was then initiated in 2020 to review and revamp its contents. Little did we know at the time what kind of a year 2020 was going to be. And that review was spearheaded by a joint MAPS project team, which was overseen by a body of UN agencies, many of whom are here today, who are members of the task team on integrated policy support. So the revamped version of the toolkit is designed so as to provide UN country teams, agency experts, and governments with easy access to existing tools, for accelerating progress on the SDGs and on the 2030 agenda, and all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. The online platform is managed by UNDP, by UNICEF, and ILO. And one of the notable features of the toolkit is the addition of a risk-informed development tools. This feature clearly is significant, as a backdrop to the review was, of course, the evolving COVID-19 pandemic. Now, while the toolkit is not really designed for emergency relief or disaster response applications, it does provide many tools that can be useful in the immediate kind of socioeconomic response to the pandemic, as well as in terms of effective recovery planning and implementation. So we'd encourage you to explore it from that angle as well. And as we entered the decade of action for the SDGs, and as the world was ravaged by COVID-19, we can glimpse recovery on the horizon. And, though we still face many challenges in the days to come, the recovery, however, gives a lot of opportunities to build a fairer and more sustainable manner in a way that puts people at the center, as well as the environment at the top of the agenda. And this toolkit is one of our contributions to these efforts by equipping those of you who work on the SDGs with the right tools and methods that are very current. So I'd like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank the colleagues from all of the UN agencies who spearheaded and participated in the review, and to thank also Darren Swanson of Novell Futures, who worked with the Joint Maps team in this process of development and review. My sincere appreciation as well to the Development Coordination Office for support of the United Nations, for the support to the task team. And I really hope you are all looking forward to reviewing and the preview of the toolkit today, and to listening to our speakers from IOM and the UN team in Nepal. With that, back to you, Mathieu, and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Pernilla, for your remarks. Thank you so much. And now we look forward to more insight into the toolkit. So I would like to now turn the floor to Laurel Patterson, who is another very key member and co-chair of the task team. Laurel is also the head of the SDG integration at UNDP. So Laurel, I think you will give us an overview of the SDG acceleration toolkit, and I believe also walk us through the website. The floor is yours.
Mathieu, thank you so much. Colleagues, good morning and good afternoon. Pernilla, also thank you very much for the introduction. So colleagues, it's great. We have 289 people on the call right now, and I'm just reflecting as we get into this space. Imagine that we could take forward with the same intention that we've developed the toolkit, its use and application in all of the countries that you're working in. And that's really our ambition with the toolkit. We want this to be accessible. We want to gather, as we work through the challenges of the decade ahead, an opportunity to gather best practice and really engage with all of you on how to take this toolkit into your operating environments, into the specific challenges that you're facing, and into action. And I mean, I just want to maybe add one extra point on what Pernilla has mentioned. If you can imagine, we knew that this SDG acceleration toolkit needed to be updated. It was initially created closer to the beginning of the 2030 agenda. But creating this toolkit, reviewing what was needed, was a very different exercise in the midst of a COVID pandemic. And I'm really, really proud and feel very, very grateful to be part of the UN team that brought this together, with a lot of support from DCO, ILO, UNICEF, all of our very active agency partners in the task team. And I hope that that same spirit in which we developed and designed this toolkit can be brought forward into its use and application. So my job is a pretty easy one, I think, which is to walk us through the toolkit itself. So next slide, please. And I'll do this with the speed, because we do want to be able to open up to the conversation with all of you today. What I want to maybe focus on in the outset is this is a very carefully vetted tool. We went through many iterations and rounds of review, discussions with colleagues to ensure that these are very high quality, vetted by their entities, strong quality assurance measures. So I want you to feel reassured that it's been a tremendous effort on our side to ensure that we're bringing you best in class. And we're bringing them to you in a way that's easy for you to access, easy for you to walk through and interact with, reach out to us, ask us questions, and ultimately bring the most relevance in terms of tools and diagnostics to the work that you're doing. Next slide, please. From here, we'll take a look at what are some of the entry points and some of the ways that you can use these toolkits, from very focused in that first bullet point to broader and with more opportunity for you to really innovate in terms of their use in different country contexts. But certainly we can see value in the CCA process, absolutely, to support the development of cooperation frameworks, fundamentally to support our partners in communities, in government, and so on, in the development and implementation of national plans and strategies to accelerate progress on the SDGs. And fundamentally underpinning this is the pledge to ensure that all of these tools, any efforts towards acceleration, to building forward from COVID, are ensuring that we're reaching this principled pledge to leave no one behind and reach the furthest behind first. And we hope that having such a wealth of tools in this toolkit allows you to pick and choose the ones that are going to be most relevant for the particular context in which you're operating. Next slide, please. We gathered the tools themselves from a number of different sources, from UN entities, from academia, other research institutions, and different private organizations. And we really wanted to ensure that the scope was wide, and again, that the quality of tools was very, very high. For the most part, these are tools that are open source. It will be easy for you to go through the resources and apply them in your context without additional cost. In some cases, particularly related to tailoring or the nature of the tool themselves. This is especially for additional work that's required to tailor some of these to national contexts, like some of the simulation modeling and so on. There would be a cost associated with that. And we've tried to be as clear as we can in the tools, what you can pick up and implement yourself, and where there may be additional cost implications and partnerships that you would want to enter into at the country level, and to be able to take forward some of the tools that are presented in our toolkit today. Next slide, please. We have 3 categories of tools, and this was really, it looks simple here, which is good, because this was a very time consuming for many of the colleagues who are joining us today, to ensure that this is as simple and straightforward as it can be. Integrated policy, you may leave yourself like, well, where do I begin? Where does this end? How do I really get to exactly to what I need? So we've worked very hard to categorize these in a way that we hope it's very simple for you to find what you need, and maybe to compare a couple of options across the different tools. So we have the tools around integrated approaches, around leaving no one behind, and as Pernilla was saying as well too, something we worked very hard to develop in this toolkit and in this iteration around risk-informed tools. And I think in the next slide, I'll just give you a very brief walkthrough, and you can also just scan this QR code yourself from your phone and walk through it with me, or explore it yourself as we're going through some of the main features. Next slide, please. So from the landing page yourself, you are going to be brought to the toolkit, and there'll be a button where you can browse all of the content in the acceleration toolkit. Next slide. Because the toolkit is hosted on our SDG integration microsite, you also have the opportunity to access other tools that are available in our knowledge bank, other blogs and resources which might be interesting for you. And it's clear in the way that the toolkit is established, which are the tools specific to the acceleration toolkit, and where are there other knowledge resources that may be helpful for you in your work. So we would encourage you absolutely to navigate the whole of the integration microsite. Next slide, please. You can use several filters, as you can see here, to narrow your search by different categories, themes, functions, so that it makes it easy for you to compare different options of different tools and approaches and find, hopefully with speed and agility, what you're looking for. Next slide, please. So then just a quick example here, if you click on the categorization around theme, you're able to look through the drop-down menu and find tools that are specifically categorized here. And they also cross-reference the different main categories of tools. So you can look and search in two ways, by the theme itself, and then again, keep that overall organization of these three main buckets of tools to help you find exactly what you need. Next slide, please. You can also narrow your search to a specific type of tools. So it may be that for a particular challenge that you're facing, or perhaps as a particular request that you're receiving from government or other partners, and you know that you want to use simulation models. You know absolutely that what you're after is something that you can apply in a multi-stakeholder context. You know that you need to be able to drive decision-making and consensus building, and there you may want to look, for example, for stakeholder collaboration processes and tools and so on that you can use in more of a facilitative and I mean in a different context, in-person setting, but otherwise, you know, something that you can navigate and support through a Zoom dialogue. Next slide, please. And then once you've narrowed your search, you'll get a list of tools based on your preferences. And then from there, you can dive further into what you might need. And what I really encourage all of you on the call is please do reach out to us. This, you know, it's hard for any website. It's hard for us in COVID to be as interactive as we'd like to be. But as you work through and find particular tools and you have questions about their use, you're curious about other best practice, or something just doesn't make sense to you, please reach out to us. We really have approached the creation of this toolkit as a collective and as a collaborative, and that's the only way that we're going to drive progress and acceleration. So if we had doors, they would be open. And I would really encourage all of you, as you start to get to this phase where you have maybe a short list and now you're weighing options or considerations for a particular context, our team, and this is a team across UN entities, is on hand to support you. So I just want to double click and emphasize on that. Next slide, please. When you go to a particular tool, so you may find that, for example, in this case, that this is the tool and approach that you think is going to be most important, and you click on this particular icon and tool based on your search, you'll find additional information on the tool itself, on how to explore it, where are the authors of this tool, where is this coming from. So it also gives you an opportunity, if you want to reach out directly for, in this case, to OHCHR, you will have all of that information at your fingertips to be able to do so. And then you see the various ways that we've tagged and categorized all of the tools on the right-hand column, again, to just make it as simple as possible for you to find what you need. Next slide, please. Well, that's it. Thank you. As I've said, you can reach out to us, and please do. And I want to also really recognize and appreciate the teams across our very active task team on integration policy, who's been at the heart of bringing this together, and especially to my co-chairs, both to Pernilla, Maurizio, and Matthew. So thank you all very much. Matthew, back over to you.
Thanks so much, Laurel, for this great presentation. I think we all have a much better idea, a good idea now of what the toolkit is all about. And with this, we are now going to take a little bit of a look at what it can mean for all of you at a country level. And so to do that, I'm going to introduce you two people, two great people who will give you a presentation. There will be Ms. Karine Luc, who is a Senior Human Rights Officer at OHCHR, and she's also a member of the UN SDG task team on Leaving No One Behind, as well as Stine Heiselberg, who is the team leader and strategic planning officer at the United Nations Resident Coordinator Office in Kathmandu in Nepal. So for a different view, perhaps a view of the tool from in the angle of the country where we all stand, I'll give you the floor, Karen and Stine, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. It's really a great pleasure to participate in this webinar, and really congratulations to the team for putting this toolkit together. I think it's really extraordinary. Now, I will speak very briefly about the Leaving No One Behind operational guide for UN country teams that was produced by the task team on Leaving No One Behind and human rights. It was launched as an interim guide a few years ago, and it really has already had a considerable uptake at the country level. We have piloted in a number of countries, and of course we have the privilege to hear later from Stine on the experience of piloting the guide in Nepal. Next slide, please. So why should UN country teams operationalize the pledge to leave no one behind and reach the furthest behind first? What is the objective of the guide? We've already heard, earlier from colleagues, of course, rising inequalities across the world have really become a huge challenge, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. But one question really is, do we understand leaving no one behind in the same way, as a strong human rights message that does compel us to focus on discrimination, the goal of equality, rather than just vulnerability that does not take into consideration the agency of people as rights holders. The COVID crisis, of course, has really amplified the imperative for country teams to identify and prioritize groups that are furthest behind. It has exacerbated existing inequalities, poverty, discrimination, and of course other human rights failures, with again a disproportionate impact on those most marginalized. So I think it has proven more than ever the imperative to put human rights at the center, to work together in a collaborative way across all human rights, and of course that it is indispensable to address structural inequalities that we've all seen. So the UN approach to LNOB not only entails reaching the poorest of the poor, but really seeks to combat discrimination and rising inequalities within and between countries, and of course their root causes. So the objective of the guide really is to strengthen the UN's coherent common approach to support countries. Next slide, please. So fundamentally, the guide aims to show UNCTs and their partners how to do it through a robust methodology that provides a step-by-step approach to operationalizing this pledge to leave no one behind. It seeks to adapt and employ relevant tools from across the system, and we have really worked hard to draw on all of the existing methodologies and approaches to addressing leave no one behind. It also aims, of course, to integrate this methodology into UN programming as well as support to member states. Next slide, please. So the guide provides a 5-step framework for LNOB analysis, action, monitoring, accountability, and meaningful participation. It does integrate the human rights-based approach to development, as well as gender equality and women's empowerment. And it has practical resources under each of the steps. So step 1 is, who is being left behind, which requires gathering and assessing the evidence, who's left behind, to what degree, and it includes the impact of the intersecting factors. I will say a little bit more about that in the future slides. Then the step 2 focuses on why, and seeks to prioritize and analyze. So it involves, questions such as why are people left behind? What are the immediate underlying and root causes of deprivations and discrimination? Why are people really being left behind? Because of course, as we all know, in many cases, this is not by accident, and in fact, many of the structural barriers will cause people to be often pushed further and further behind. Now, step 3 then goes into what should be done. And this involves identifying actions and interventions to address challenges, barriers, capacity gaps, and really addressing immediate and root causes. Step 4 then gives some guidance on measuring and monitoring progress. So this involves, of course, identifying both quantitative and qualitative LNOB indicators, also with a clear understanding of data and data gaps. And it's supporting innovative ways of tracking, visualizing, and sharing information, and developing partners' ability to monitor progress on inequalities. And then step 5 really focuses on accountability, and that is accountability both vis-a-vis SDG follow-up and review processes, supporting national accountability to people left behind, and then of course ensuring accountability of the UN system itself. Now, there's also a cross-cutting principle of meaningful participation. So, this requires that, really groups of populations that are left behind are engaged throughout the process. And with a specific effort to also address particular barriers that people may have to participate, such as language, location, security, concerns, stigma. So actions may include consultations, use of community data, etc. And I believe Stine will speak more about that. Next slide, please. So this slide aims to assist in assessing the evidence on who's being left behind. I've touched on that. That is the first step in the 5-step process. And of course, perhaps just to say that, given that many individuals and groups, of course, suffer from multiple forms of exclusion, this step really aims to gather the data in relation to the 5 factors that are outlined in the graph. And people in the intersection of the 5 overlapping forms of exclusion are really likely the groups that are the furthest behind. And just to recall that, of course, the approach of leaving no one behind really should target those most or furthest behind. Next
Karen,
slide.
sorry to interrupt you, Karen. If I can ask you to try to wrap up soon, so that we can go to the other speakers. Thank you.
Yes, I am almost finished. My apologies. And really, I would just, since really there isn't that much time, I encourage colleagues to reach out, with any questions. So this is really the last slide that I would like to show. Which is again the step 2, which focuses on why people are left behind. And that is using methodology that many of you will be familiar with, which is the human rights-based approach to development. So with that, I will hand over to Stine to tell us about the experience in Nepal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen, and sorry for the...
No.
and Stine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Karen. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to colleagues, and thank you for inviting me to speak. So Nepal was one of 3 pilot countries, and we volunteered to undertake the test run of the LNOB practical guide. And that was before we knew what we were getting ourselves into. And I think sometimes when you stand in front of big tasks, it's perhaps better not to know. So,
21, 22, 23, 24, 25.
If I can ask, please, everyone to keep their microphone on mute so that we can hear the speaker. Thank you.
Okay. So in ultra running, you're told to slow down from the beginning so you can go further and faster in the long run. And I think that LNOB and SDG acceleration is a little bit like that. You slow down in the beginning, but then you can go much further and also faster. So we had many jump starts in the beginning when we were trying to apply the methodology, as we thought we were going to apply it to a program to avoid having the documentation and report tsunami that often happens. So with COVID-19, we had to wait for a while to see what would be the impact in Nepal. At the outset, before COVID-19, the discussions we had tended to be abstract and about the trade-offs and the principles applied. They were sort of like, are we trying to paint with a big brush and cover as much as possible, or are we taking the smaller brush for the finer details? And these are very real trade-offs when it comes to time, money, human resources, and priorities. A bit into the COVID-19 era, we then decided to apply the LNOB methodology to the development of our socioeconomic response plan. And here's the first thing that's required. It's a serious buy-in from all involved and a humility to listen and learn. It's a bit like the old George Harrison song where it says it's going to take time, a whole lot of precious time to do it right. And as part of the LNOB methodology, we consulted over 40 different groups and over 1,000 people to get to know the impact of COVID-19 on them, harvest their ideas on how to mitigate the impact. These different groups and people were chosen on the basis of the criteria you've seen listed by Karen to make sure that we considered all angles and included all groups. But we did not just consult with those left behind, but with a wide segment of society that had been impacted. But we never lost sight of the LNOB approach. And we also consulted with those that we would not traditionally have done, recognizing that there were very real impacts of the pandemic on them. So for example, sex workers who were thrown out of the hotels, both workplaces and their home. And that was not normally a group of people that we would be consulting with in order to see how we should respond. This time, it was online consultations due to the COVID-19 situation. And I have to give a massive shout out to UNDP for their work on this and help in this. We were also assisted by expert consultants to frame the consultations in the right ways and creating an empowering environment. Some would say that the digital platforms are exclusionary, but it also allowed us to consult much more widely across the country and with more people. But it really took time, commitment, and energy, and groups kept being added and included as we saw how it was going. All this information and all these consultations were then analyzed and used to inform the interventions in our socioeconomic response framework, including an LNOB strategy within the framework to ensure the interventions were designed to prioritize the furthest left behind first. And then we reviewed the whole socioeconomic framework from the LNOB angle, and lo and behold, it could be integrated even more. So we took another round of discussions with the UN agencies, looking at the comments, suggestions, and making sure that interventions will also really reach those furthest behind. Now the implementation is ongoing, so I'm going to owe it to you to answer on how the LNOB methodology has worked in the second part of the implementation, but I can talk to that at the next webinar you're going to have on the practical implementation of this acceleration package. The LNOB approach was also used for the SDG's COVID-19 Response Fund application. So the project that was developed had a focus on the most vulnerable and impacted by COVID-19. The work done in one area, the socioeconomic response framework, could be used in others, and we ensured that they mutually reinforced each other. Just to round up with this, LNOB is about bringing in diverse perspectives, ideas, and voices. It's about targeting and monitoring at all stages of the process. And it is not and cannot be just a list and ranking of groups. And I have to say, having gone through it, it's messy, it needs to be adjusted, it's reiterative, and it's also at times very difficult. But the practical guide for LNOB is a support for this process, and it helps think through the various steps. But it does not provide the solutions. If it was as easy as that, no one would be left behind. So this is where the expertise of those affected, the UN agencies in and outside the country, and all our other partners that we have locally and internationally come into play. And they help us find the solutions, financing, and support. And the upside tool of this is that in order to accelerate the SDGs for all, the LNOB Practical Guide is a very handy tool for us and a real booster to help us in this process. And that's it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tina, for this great introduction and presentation. And at this stage, I would like to mention that already we are receiving quite a few questions. Please feel free, put your questions in a chat box. We'll do our best to raise them, or you can also add a question should you wish to do so. So with this, we are now going to move on, and I would like to invite Manuel Hoff, who is from the IOM, to take the floor. Manuel is actually a policy officer at the Migration and Sustainable Unit of the International Organization for Migration. And Manuel, I understand that you will present us with a tool on integrating migration into the COVID-19 social economic response. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mathieu, and good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be with you, and thanks for the opportunity to present one of the tools that has been included in the SDG Acceleration Toolkit. I would also like to congratulate, of course, both UNICEF, UNDP, and ILO colleagues for coordinating this joint task team of the UN over the past year and deliver really such an excellent result with the SDG Acceleration Toolkit. I will be very briefly sharing an overview of IOM's tool to integrate migration into the COVID-19 response and show examples on how the different sections of this tool can actually be used. Next slide, please. So to start, I would like to recap on the policy brief on COVID-19 and people on the move that was published last year by the UN Secretary General. And that stated that COVID-19 crisis is an opportunity to reimagine human mobility for the benefit of all, while advancing our central commitment of the 2030 agenda to leave no one behind. So this tool really aims to support this mission, to identify and address vulnerabilities that migrants face in the COVID-19 pandemic, whilst also recognizing migrants' agency and leveraging their contributions to the response and the recovery of COVID-19. Next slide, please. So this tool is aimed to support the work of development partners, including UN agencies, donors, and government authorities in partner countries. And as you can see, it is registered in the toolkit under a tool that promotes risk-informed development planning. Next slide, please. The toolkit was designed in line with the initial 5 pillars of the UN response to COVID-19 that now also have been integrated into the wider development planning processes of the UN system. And it is designed to be very concise, to be very operational and practical to use. So the majority of the document actually consists of a list of guiding questions and checklists, as you can see in the example below. So it can be really used by practitioners in their everyday work. Next slide, please. I won't go in too much into detail here, but just to highlight that the toolkit follows a bit the broader policy and programming cycle of practitioners. So going from analysis to identification of priorities for interventions to implementation, and lastly also evaluation. So the total number of tools, it's 8 individual tools, and I'll briefly guide you through them. And of course, you have opportunities to ask more questions afterwards. Next slide, please. This is a perfect link with the previous presentation. So we have here as a first tool a quick diagnostic to leave no one behind that can be connected to or integrated in the broader leaving no one behind analysis. So it's really when you want to know how are migrants left behind in the COVID-19 response. It includes questions to answer when tackling the immediate emergency, when focusing on the social impact and the economic response, and when focusing on how to recover better. So identifying the barriers to social and economic response that impact migrants, but also assess how migrants are included or not in recovery strategies. Next slide, please. The second tool is a situation analysis that allows you to go a bit deeper into the topic. So you see on the left side the different elements of migration and displacement dynamic, and you have here questions to understand the migration and mobility context and its interconnections with COVID-19. You also have an overview of the main COVID-19 data sources that can be used for that. Next slide, please. Same for stakeholder analysis, engaging the right stakeholders around migration and displacement is important. So how can we make sure that migrants and refugees are included in the design of policy and programming responses, but also that all these different stakeholders that you see here on the left side are engaged with the right questions to ensure they integrate migration into the wider COVID-19 response. Next slide. You then have a tool on problem analysis to develop solutions with migrants and at the center. So it is really an overview of a few of the key problems that have been identified and potential areas of support that you can consider in your COVID-19 response and recovery planning. So here as an example, you have restricted migration that can lead to labor shortages. What can you do as a development actor to counter that or to address that in your COVID-19 response and recovery? Next slide. You also have a risk analysis tool, so including key migration-related risks and how to address them. I won't go into detail, but it can also inform broader risk assessments of your response. Next slide. Then you have a project design checklist, similarly very easy to use, guiding questions on how can you ensure that during your COVID-19 interventions actually consider migrants and migration. Simple steps, supposedly simple, but not always that straightforward. How can we make sure that data is being disaggregated by migration status, gender and age? How are migrants and refugees included in the response themselves? Next slide, please. Similar for project monitoring, when you implement your project, how can you make sure that migrants and refugees are included? And the next slide, of course, also the project evaluation. So this includes a checklist according to different evaluation criteria to make sure how your intervention considered migration. So it goes by the relevance, coherence, effectiveness, efficiency, the actual impact, and sustainability. So this is the tool in a nutshell, and you can access it through the acceleration toolkit, but also in 4 languages, in English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese on this link below. So happy to answer any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manuel. What a great tool. And can you imagine that this is just one of the more than 100 tools that you will find on the platform. So very useful indeed. Thank you again. It's now time to come to some of your questions. So I will invite the panelists to jump back in and turn on your cameras for the panelists if you would like to do so. And we can take some questions for the next maybe 5 to 10 minutes. So I can see that we have received a few. The first one is about, is it possible to add some additional tools into the toolkit? I believe that the answer is yes, but perhaps maybe Laurel, you want to say something about this?
Sure, I'm just finding my mute button. Thanks. So colleagues, absolutely. I mean, this needs to be a dynamic, and we need to capture best in class as we go and as those are developed. What we'll do is we'll approach that in a structured way. So our intention would be to have a review of the toolkit and a second call for proposals so that we can ensure the same strict quality criteria as we have. So we'll put that request out, and that will be an opportunity towards, towards the third quarter, I guess is the best way of saying it, of this year. And we'll structure and phase a continued updating of the toolkit.
And maybe a follow-up question, Laurel, somebody is asking, noticing that this version of the toolkit dates from March 2019. So is it still up to date? I understand that it is up to date because it keeps being updated because we keep adding new tools.
Correct. Yes, that's correct. I mean, some of these tools were developed prior to COVID, and I think that doesn't mean that they're not relevant. I think part of the consideration and the creativity, and I think what's important in the community that we want to create implementing these tools is to look at what is the best way to apply them given a COVID reality where priorities may have shifted, where particular challenges that we already knew existed. And I really appreciate both the presentations of Stina and of Karen in this respect, but they may have amplified, and that might change the way that we want to apply a particular tool. But some of these approaches were, of course, in place before COVID, and part of our consideration in the review last year was ensuring that they are still very valid and relevant for supporting both UNCT processes and government planning processes, and we believe they are.
Thank you. And actually, you just mentioned Karen and Stina. Maybe they want to come in because there is the question on the indicators to monitor LNOB, leaving no one behind. Maybe you want to give us some feedback about that. What indicators can be used for monitoring LNOB if you're around, Karen or Stina?
This is Tina, so maybe I can just say that's a really good question, and it's actually part of the LNOB guide to develop indicators to measure your success. So I would, if I may hazard, is that it depends a lot on the country context and the specific challenges that you're facing in the country. Again, gender, not just gender, but gender and all the other various subgroups that you can disaggregate it according to and use that to measure are really, really important. So the more granulation you can get, the better. But again, don't spend all your time on granulating data. You also need to analyze it. But I would hazard that it depends a lot on the country context, and I wouldn't dare to guess on other countries. It's a big part of the work to develop these indicators so you can hold yourself accountable to your constituencies, whether they be the government, your financing instruments, or the communities you're working with. Karen, you might be able to expand.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the question. Just on the indicators, I mean, I agree with what Stina said, and I think it's also very much, of course, linked to the disaggregated data and the availability of disaggregated data, which is, of course, also one of the big challenges, and that's also the feedback that we have received from countries that have started to pilot the guide, and perhaps also just to emphasize that you know, the emphasis really should always be on quantitative and qualitative data, and you know, the same for the indicators, and the guide is trying to give some tips on that. So you know, and again, you know, always useful to have examples of what country teams have done to develop those indicators in the specific country context. I just wanted to also say something on the COVID question, and you know, whether it has been updated. Yes, the guide has been updated, but not so much actually. I mean, we are now reflecting also some of the lessons learned in the context of COVID. But of course, now that we're moving into, again, the CCA and the cooperation framework, of course, leave no one behind is a guiding principle. And there is a lot of guidance, which is also linked to the LNOB guide on the application of the LNOB principle in the context of the CCA and cooperation framework. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Karen, and maybe stay around because there is a follow-up question coming to us asking about what specific LNOB measures are in place for the acceleration for developing countries. You know, there is a question from Malawi, but it applies to other developing countries. So what exact, you know, LNOB measures in place for acceleration for those countries which did not necessarily do very well with the MDGs?
Well, again, this is, you know, very important question, and I think it touches more on also the question of inequalities between countries, which is of course also, an important consideration. Now, the guide itself, doesn't, it is really focused on supporting country teams, doing their analysis and doing their programs. It doesn't, give a prescriptive way of what measures, are or should be in place. I mean, it is really more of a technical tool to support the country team to develop those responses.
Thank you, Karen. So now I'm going to another question, maybe to other panelists, and it's about the policy coherence. It's about the coherence between the whole 2030 agenda, the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the Sendai framework for DRR, saying that sometimes development choices could create new risks and increase CO2 emissions. So the question specifically is, do we have tools in order to ensure the coherence in the design and in the implementation of those plans and actions? And how are we approaching the need for conference from the UN? Maybe a question for Pernilla or Laurel or any other panelist.
Laurel, do you mind taking, just because my voice is really weak at the moment? Okay, Mathieu, could you just repeat and I'll give it my best?
Yeah, no, of course. The question is about policy coherence and how we can make sure that the 2030 agenda, the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the Sendai framework for DRR are all integrated, because sometimes development choices could create new risks and increase even CO2 emissions. And so the question specifically is to know if we have tools that can ensure such coherence in the design and in the implementation of the plans and of the actions. So
that is an excellent question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm the technical expert on a specific tool that's available, but I would encourage the colleague who's asking that question to review the myriad of tools that have already been put together, and to see whether or not one of those might fit for that question to prevent it. It's also incumbent on, of course, if you're sitting in a UN country team or whatever your setting may be, to have those discussions with your colleagues across the board when you're taking on new initiatives.
Okay, thank you so much, Pernilla. I'm reading through the other questions. We still have about 2 minutes to go through those. One of them is about advocacy, specifically advocacy with the program cycle and how the toolkit could help with this. It would help to see, this is the question, would help to see the different points where advocacy with the different stakeholders that involves using different strategies would be useful, and the emphasis on that role of advocacy. So how can the toolkit be used as really an advocacy tool? Not sure who would like to take this one. Manuel, maybe?
Happy to take that one. Yes. No, that's a really good question, and I think if you go through the different tools that are registered on the in the toolkit, you see the different links to advocacy. So I've just presented one example on how you can include relevant stakeholders around migration and mobility, and ensure joint advocacy in an integrated manner from that angle. But you have these different other tools that are included here that also allow you to come in from different entry points and see what your priority is, be it in your country context or in whatever position you are working in a government, civil society, and so on. So I think it can be very useful from a variety of entry points. The importance here is to make sure, I mean, it is all about policy integration, right? To make sure that the key stakeholders are engaged in a coherent manner, so that communication lines are not necessarily confused. But generally, the short answer is yes. There's a lot around advocacy in this toolkit. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you, Manuel. There was also a question about whether or not there is a newsletter to keep us updated on progress. So the answer is that we will keep you updated, and we are going to share links with all of you so that we can be in touch and provide you information on the toolkit and also on other platforms that we will mention in just a minute that will integrate the toolkit. And maybe time for one last question, which is to know if there is any specific tool that can be used to better integrate the SDGs in projects and in programs. So in projects, programs that are being implemented by member states, in all of these more than 100 tools that we have on the platform, is there any that that any of the panelists can think of that can be specifically linked to the better integration of the SDGs in those projects or programs? Maybe from the Leave No One Behind team, LNOB team, maybe, or Karen, I see you.
Yes, thank you very much. No, I think, I mean, on the LNOB guide specifically, there are, concrete suggestions on what kind of programs could be launched to address, the root causes that come out of the analysis and the prioritization of the country team. So indeed, there are some suggestions. There are examples also what country teams have done, also including, for example, integrating Leave No One Behind perspective in the voluntary national reviews, which links to the monitoring aspect of making progress. I mean, that's just really one example.
No, and it's a very good one. Thank you so much, Karen. And with this, we are coming soon to the end of this session, of this webinar today. We only have about 2 minutes, so thank you so much for your questions. And I hope that everyone, all of you, have found this webinar useful. I think we can say, to go back to the beginning of where we started, that the fact that the SDGs seem today to be harder to reach really only makes our effort more valuable and our commitment more relevant. And I think it's also in this spirit that this same UN SDG task team that has worked so hard on the development of the toolkit is now working on the development of another knowledge platform, a knowledge sharing platform that is the Integrated Policy Practitioners Network, that is called IPPN for its acronym. So I cannot show it to you today because it's still being developed, but it will be finalized soon and launched hopefully in the coming months. It's a platform that you will be able to see very soon. And I would like to, if you're interested, just invite you all to sign up on the startup page. So my colleagues are going to show the hyperlink in the chat box. And if you go there and give us your information, we'll be able to follow up and therefore also let you know of the development and the news in terms of not only the toolkit, but also the IPPN, the Integrated Policy Practitioners Network. If you have any other questions that we haven't been able to raise today or that come up after this webinar, please feel free to also reach out to our group at maps.team@undp.org, maps.team@undp.org. And I think that with this, we have learned a lot, and I would just like to extend my sincere appreciation to everyone, to all the panelists, to Pernilla Ironside of UNICEF, to Laurel Patterson of UNDP, to Karen Luke of OHCHR, to Stina Haselberg of the United Nations Resident Coordinator Office in Nepal, Animal Health of IOM, and also I wish to extend sincere thanks to the entire team that has worked so much on development of the toolkit and also on the organization of this event. With this, I thank you and see you next time.